And for you, maybe today you feel like he must be asleep in the boat. Or maybe he's not even in the boat. Maybe he doesn't even know that I'm in the boat and I'm sinking. No, he knows. He knows all of that. But in his great wisdom and love, he also knows when to speak peace to the situation. But for now, like he said to them, why are you afraid? He's with us in the storm. And he wants us to rest in that, just as he was resting in the boat then. Now, one final thing. And this, we're going to take a bit of a different turn here as we close today. There's an interesting parallel between the story that we read here and another story in the Bible. And I'm going to read to you a portion from a book written by Timothy Keller. I've quoted Timothy Keller many times. In his study through the Gospel of Mark, he does this interesting, he brings out this interesting parallel between the story that we have here and the story of Jonah. And I want to kind of tie it all together with this. So let me read this to you. He said this, he said, Mark has deliberately laid out this account using language that is parallel, almost identical to the language of the famous Old Testament account of Jonah. Both Jesus and Jonah were in a boat, and both boats were overtaken by a storm. The descriptions are almost identical. Both Jesus and Jonah were asleep. In both stories, the sailors woke up the sleeper and said, "We're going to die." And in both cases, there was a miraculous divine intervention and the sea was calm. Further, in both stories, the sailors then became even more terrified than they were before the storm was calmed. Two almost identical stories with just one difference. In the midst of the storm, Jonah said to the sailors, in effect, "There's only one thing to do. If I perish, you survive. If I die, you will live." And they threw him into the sea, which doesn't happen in Mark's story, or does it? I think Mark's showing that the stories aren't different when you stand back a bit and look at them with the rest of the story of Jesus in view. In Matthew's gospel, Jesus says one greater than Jonah is here, and he's referring to himself. He would say, "I am the true Jonah." He meant this: someday I'm going to calm all storms, still all waves. I'm going to destroy destruction, break brokenness, and kill death. How can he do that? He can do it only because when he was on the cross, he was thrown willingly, like Jonah, into the ultimate storm, under the ultimate waves, the waves of sin and death. Jesus was thrown into the only storm that can actually sink us, the storm of eternal justice, of what we owe God for our wrongdoing. The storm wasn't calmed until it swept him away. As Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So the great storm, the greatest storm, the storm of God's judgment against sin, Jesus calmed that storm by, as Keller said, metaphorically being cast into the sea of judgment. And he did that because he loved us. And because he demonstrated his love by allowing himself to be cast into that storm of death. We can have every bit of confidence that having done that for us, everything else is already covered. It's already taken care of. And so maybe, like the disciples, you find yourself in a storm today. Well, take heart. Be of good cheer, because the Lord has calmed the storm. And just trust him. It's simple in one sense. It's hard in another. It's hard because we always come to but what if this and what if that, and I don't understand, and there's just a point where you just say, okay, Lord, I'm going to trust you. And when you do that, that in and of itself will calm the storm. Maybe you're with us today, and maybe you're not following Christ, but it's a storm that has brought you here today. That will happen. When you're going through a storm, you're looking for an answer. You're looking for deliverance. And, thank God, a lot of people get washed up on the beach of Calvary or some other church. And you find yourself here, and it's not where you planned on being. Of course, the storm is not where you planned on being, but that's where you're at. And so the storm has brought you here today, and the storm has brought you here so you could call upon the one who went into God's storm, or into the storm of God's judgment, and bore your sin so you could be forgiven and delivered. And you're here today to know that God himself, he loves you, and he's got a plan for you. And it's not that you should perish in the storm, but that you should be delivered from your sin, and that he would begin to work in your current situation to bring that peace and that calm that he has in store for you. And so if that's you today, today's the day to receive that hand. When you think of somebody that's out in a stormy water, somebody gets washed down a river, or somebody's out in a lake, or out in the sea, or whatever. What do we throw to them? We throw to them a lifesaver. Well, Jesus is that lifesaver. God's thrown out to us the gospel, and all we do is just grab on, and that's it.